Hello and welcome back to another episode of Destroying the To Be Read Pile. This is me trying to get rid of about 140 odd books that I have to be read sitting on my shelf. I started these reading logs in January of 2024 and they'll be running through to the end of 2024. This month is February, so we're just going to get up Goodreads, go through the books and see what I thought of what I read in February 2024. First up was a Hellboy book. Hellboy Universe, The Secret Histories. Now this was one that's been on my shelves for ages, and I put it off because I'm always a bit nervous about reading the offshoots of Hellboy's universe. And what I mean by that is the main story arcs, so the two main focus story arcs within Mignolaverse is Hellboy and the BPRD. They have all been very solid, but then whenever you get these standalone issues or arcs that don't really fall into either of those main stories, they are always very hit and miss, I think. They're always enjoyable, but sometimes some are a bit less than what you think they could be or should be. And Hellboy Universe's Secret Histories is kind of a mixed bag like that as well. So Hellboy Secret History collects The Voice of the Dragon, which is a Rasputin origin arc in a way, but more of an origin of how he revived Hellboy and a bit about him and his approach to bringing about the end of the world, really. Then Sledgehammer 44, which is about a suit of armour in 1944. Then The Visitor, How and Why He Stayed. Why it's a mixed bag is Rasputin, The Voice of the Dragon is a fine story. There's nothing really drastically wrong with it. It's got good arcs for Trevor Brumenthal, which is, the professor who is Hellboy's father of sorts. And it's very much a story of Rasputin and then Trevor Brumenthal and a few of his colleagues trying to hunt down some artifacts and things from various societies and mysterious societies that have left secrets that will help Rasputin forward his approach to ending the world. He's looking for information on the Ogru Jihad, I'll say it like that, but then all the while you know that he's going to build to bringing Hellboy back, and all that story. So this is a bit of a prelude to all of that, and it's fine, but the art I didn't much like at all, really. It was an art style that was not really that interesting. I thought it was a little bit unadventurous and a little bit, dare I say, ugly, but, that's just how I felt about the art, unfortunately. Sledgehammer 44 had a really solid art team on it and was really great. And that follows the armour, this sledgehammer armour, and a captain inside using this mysterious power that the armour's imbued with to attack the Nazis during World War II, but then the armour itself has got much more deeper, mysterious powers that are yet to be discovered, really. And it's probably my favourite out of this book, really, because it doesn't outstay its welcome. The art style is good, and it brings about all these different mysteries of the armour and what powers it and what it's going to do, and particularly knowing how important the sledgehammer armour is to the BPRD series later, it kind of gives much more of a kind of focus to this story, because it doesn't really exist in its full form elsewhere in the Hellboy universe. Then The Visitor, How and Why is all telling the story of a visitor, an alien or interdimensional being coming to Earth and then basically watching Hellboy grow up, have a life of his own, but then come in and out of Hellboy's life at various points. While it's amusing at some points, this type of story always irritates me. A story where much later a character is kind of retroactively laid into the narrative and they are responsible for certain things, and I kind of don't like that, because one of the things I like about Hellboy is it leaves so much unexplained, and so much is kind of coincidence or accidental or totally unexplained, because it's so supernatural and mystical and godlike. Us mere mortals can't even put into words what the hell is going on, and I kind of like that because it allows your own imagination to come up with narratives, and it's like looking at a more of an abstract painting that you talk about a bit, but because it doesn't give you clear answers, you talk about it a bit more. It's not like a standard portrait that you can just look at and go, oh, that's this person, and walk away from. And The Visitor almost kind of undermines a lot of the things that were mysterious or accidental or interesting about Hellboy's stories in the past, and the artwork is horrendous. I really dislike the artwork in it. Then I got into Tintin stories. I've been reading these with my daughter. I was a massive fan of Tintin when it was brought to life in the animated series. I watched it all through my youth and read several of the books, but mainly focused on the TV series. And then in recent times, I rebought the box set and I've been going through them. For me, Tintin doesn't really start till the Blue Lotus. But the one thing that does make me incredibly uncomfortable reading Tintin is the outright racism and kind of, very dated ways of, treating people in the world and treating the characters and narratives. And you might say, oh yeah, it's of this day and all that type of thing, which is always annoying because it always assumes that there wasn't the counter argument in this day. It's almost saying that, the majority is there, so everyone does the majority, so it's all right to do it. But there was many people that weren't being as visually and textually, racist and stereotypical as Hergé. When reading them with my daughter, it has helped me a bit, because when they see like Tintin black up and things like that, for example, they just say, oh, that's inappropriate, let's kind of continue. It doesn't dwell with them as it does with me, which has allowed me to kind of get a bit of distance from it and just kind of enjoy it. And my daughter recently on World Book Day, dressed up as Tintin. So for her, reading through these stories, she sees all the faults and sees the issues, but she doesn't dwell on them like I do. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but I still enjoy enough about Tintin's arcs to stick with it, to be fair. The art style is very nice. The story is really convoluted and kind of coincidental, which is what's interesting about Tintin, and it always goes off on many, many different tangents and in different directions. So the Blue Lotus, Cigars of the Pharaoh, the Broken Year, and the Black Island are all ones that I've read recently. My favourite is probably the Black Island. Cigars of the Pharaoh is really good as well. The Broken Year is not that great. It's not that great. And the Blue Lotus is okay as well. But anyway, I enjoyed most of these really. The better Tintin stories are to come, but Black Island is a really interesting story, I think, and I love how it ends with a kind of gorilla in this random castle. It's a great kind of flight of fancy, I think. Then Rain by Joe Hill, but it's been adapted by David Mbua and Zoe Thorogood. Joe Hill wrote this as a standalone story, and then it's been adapted for comics by David Mbua, and the art is by Zoe Thorogood. Now I read this and I like Zoe Thorogood's art massively, and I love Joe Hill's writing, particularly in Lock and Key, but I have read a few things of late that haven't been that great by him. I think he's had a very downward trajectory with his writing, for me personally. So I was a bit on the fence about this one, and then when I read it, it was really not great on all fronts. The art, for a start, Zoe Thorogood's art style in general is a nice art style, but the consistency is all over the place, the hands, the faces, perspective. There's lots of what I would say simplistic mistakes made, and the problem I have with that is when you compare it to Zoe Thorogood's other work, which she's done on her own, it's light years behind. And so if you were coming to this after, say, The Impending Blindness of Billy Scott or The Loneliness of the Centre of the Earth, you will see a very much weaker, dare I say, Zoe Thorogood. It's not terrible, but it isn't great. The story starts off very intriguing about Rain solidifying into sharp nail-like objects and basically killing most of the population in Boulder, Colorado. And then a lady named Honeysuckle Speck, which, again, the ridiculous names in this book were ridiculous. But either way, Honeysuckle Speck was there. Apologies to anyone named Honeysuckle. But she was there and she had an amazing loss instantly. And she then goes off on a mission to travel to a nearby city to tell a parent about the death of her child, basically. And so she meets other people and cult-like people. The cast is not that big, and most of the people she run into are kind of very damaged, cult-like figures or criminals and things like that. There's one or two that are nice, but in general, she's constantly avoiding the rain and the horrific scenes across the city. My main problem with it is more like how predictable it was, and you could see the twist coming a mile off, and that it wasn't really that engaging a story arc. Going to a person's house to tell them about a loved one dying is a nice thread, I suppose, a nice story arc to get them into it. But ultimately, it didn't really capture me at all. I was kind of not really that invested in it, but we will come back to more Zoe Thorogood in a second now. Next, Seven to Eternity, which is by Rick Remender and Jerome Pena. I have been putting off reading this for ages. I love the artwork of Jerome Pena. I really do love his detailed, scratchy, inventive, creative artwork. It's wonderful. Matt Hollingsworth on colours, which is a solid hands, and Rick Remender has been hit and miss forever for me. Some of the story arcs and some of the characters he's written are some of my favourites, and some of them I just can't gel with at all. So that's why I was worried about this. But Seven to Eternity, when I picked it up, I couldn't put it down. I absolutely loved it. This is probably the thing that I enjoyed most out of the month of February. It follows Adam Orsidis, I think that's how you pronounce it, but he is basically dying, and he lives in this fantasy world, and in the world that Adam's in, it's all being kind of corrupted and taken over by someone called the God of Whispers. Now what the God of Whispers is he's one of the many people spread out across this world that have these kind of magical gifts. I think they might call them Morlocks or something in the book. It's gone out of my head now. But either way, they've got these mystical powers, and they all vary massively, but the power that the God of Whispers has is he can know and understand what your main desires are, and he'll offer you them into reality. He will make you an offer, and if you accept that offer, he actually kind of takes part of you away. He can see the world through your eyes, and you become part of him in many ways. Adam and one of his family are one of the people that have fought against everything that the God of Whispers stands for. His grandfather gets killed and he gets summoned to go to the God of Whispers. The God of Whispers wants to offer him something, and it's very much then interrupted by a band of people that want to take him captive and take him to another part of the world of Zal, the kingdom of Zal, which this whole universe is kind of based around. And they are taking him there because they want to separate him from the rest of the people in the world. Why? Is because they want him to die and they want his reign to end, but they can't kill him without killing everyone that have heard an offer. So they literally are tied between living with him or killing millions upon millions of people. The story starts as a kind of road trip type story, really, with this unique cast of characters going through this very imaginative, fantastical world that Rick Remender and Jerome Pena bring to life in such a beautiful way. But then it twists and turns in so many ways, and you're presented with a typical extremely damaged main character, which Rick Remender seems to adore. He adores writing his main character as absolutely, unpredictable in what they're going to do and where they're going to turn, and always really, really contradictory in their whole outlook on the world. And yeah, generally he writes his main characters fantastically, but the world here was brilliant as well. This fantasy world that they create is so full of amazing creatures and lore, and yeah, I enjoyed the story all the way through. I will say the ending didn't feel as epic as the journey, but it didn't really take it away from it for me too much. I still enjoyed it massively. Then we got into Stray Bullets Killers by one of my favourite, David Lapham. Stray Bullets is a fantastic series. I've done a video or two on a few Stray Bullet books in the past, and this was one of the remaining volumes that I hadn't fully read, because volume 5 and I didn't enjoy as much, and volume 4 was quite emotionally hard because the crimes it was focusing on were really hard. The same as 5 actually, but 5 was a little bit more, I think 5 was probably the weakest. There was a main character called Virginia who had been just relentlessly kind of abused and pushed into places, as well as a few others, and so I kind of took a step back from Stray Bullets for a while. That tells you really how good it is, the fact that I cared that much about the characters that I didn't want to see them put through any more punishment. So it took me a while to get back to this, but this was one of the best volumes that I read of Stray Bullets. It really is an exceptional one. It brings Virginia back, sets her up with a boyfriend, and then it follows these two lovers' journey through a very kind of messed up world. And if you haven't read any of the Stray Bullets series, then have a look at the videos I've already done, because this story really does focus massively on two teenagers in a twisted story full of criminality, Brother Heart of Virginia and Eli, who are both deeply scarred by their personal kind of, childhoods. And yeah, it really is an amazing story with those two at the heart, and I very much enjoyed this. And the artwork and story for David Lapham is just always so good. Read Stray Bullets if you haven't read them. Pick up any volume you like. Start any you like. Just get into it. Godzilla, the deluxe edition by James Stokoe. Called a deluxe edition even though it's not a deluxe, which I have moaned about and other people have moaned about. This was very good. Very good. The 4 issues collected here in the half-century war is a really solid story arc. It does get a bit repetitive because essentially it keeps coming back to Godzilla popping up in the world, and then this team that has been formed against him appearing and trying to combat him. And so it starts with the first time Godzilla makes landfall in, the mid-50s, and then it kind of keeps coming back to him going through the next half a century over the 50 years, and lots of other monsters and stories come into it, lots of different ways of attacking Godzilla and him getting away from it, obviously. But in general, the 4 issues contained here were really solid and the artwork were really good. I got nothing really to criticise it. If you like monster comics, if you like kaiju comics, then this is great because it does all of those things. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's quite quick and easy and nice and pleasant to read and to look at. My main issue is 1 issue of Godzilla in the end, which is Godzilla in Hell. Because James Stokoe wrote this issue, drew this issue really, because it's a silent comic, there is no writing necessary in terms of lettering and speech bubbles and things like that, because Godzilla is the main character and he can't talk. But either way, the 1 issue with Godzilla at the end is just 1 issue in a series of Godzilla in Hell, and it's really frustrating that you read this 1 issue of a really nice, interesting kind of Godzilla in Hell story, and you think, oh, where's it go? And it just ends and there's nothing more to it. And that's very frustrating because I understand that they're including it because James Stokoe drew it, but the fact that it would leave most people, I think, who reading it quite frustrated that it's just the beginning of the story and nothing else, and a very one-dimensional beginning as well, to be fair, that it was needlessly included here just because James Stokoe's name is there. The other thing that annoys me massively about this book is that it was released in hardcover not that long ago, which is still in print in certain places and still available in certain places, and the original print was oversized and contained just the 4 issues of the half-century war, not the Godzilla in Hell. And so I would say just get that one because you won't have the frustrating end issue and you'll have it oversized properly. And yeah, if you can get the other one, get the other one. Taiyo Matsumoto, Tokyo These Days Volume 1. This is a new ongoing series by Taiyo Matsumoto, who done Tech on Concrete, Ping Pong, Sunny, Number 5, all of those amazing books. And anyone who's watched the channel knows that I'm a very big fan of Taiyo Matsumoto. He creates these very weird, eerie, familiar worlds, and it always lets his imagination fly. This one is similar to Sunny though, because Sunny was based partly on his autobiographical life story in homes and childcare in Japan, and this one is based around manga and manga creators and editors and the industry. And so it focuses on a group of manga creators, one mainly who basically, after being, a manga editor for a couple of decades, decides that he wants to quit and retires, and then he kind of reflects on his life for a bit and decides that he wants to actually write one last manga, and so he tries to assemble a team of people to try and create this manga. But instantly what it does is you're introduced to manga creators and editors and publishers and all of these different layers, and you see in all these different problems with artists not feeling like they're being creative enough, like they basically play into the popular culture and things like that, and not really fulfilling their own art style, that are a bit empty, that they need the editor. The editors in general are shown as kind of almost like parental characters to the manga creators, helping them usher these creations into the real world. And so it's a view on manga creators and creation in Tokyo through the eyes of Taiyo Matsumoto. It's all pretty fictionalized, but I would be shocked if he hasn't worked a lot of his, experiences into the narrative. But equally, being a Taiyo Matsumoto book, it'll never be as straightforward. So a few of the characters have got a few quirks and a few weird things going on. But this is very much the start of the story. Much like if you would pick up Sunny Volume 1, you would get introduced to the world and the characters and have a glimpse as to what might be coming later. This is very much the same, but it's a really good solid start. I very much enjoyed it. Then the last book I read in February was another Zoe Thorogood, It's Lonely at the Centre of the Earth. This one I've been putting off for a while as well because it had a lot of hype around it, and I didn't want to let that hype get the better of me in any way, because sometimes a book cannot survive the hype. There are so many books that have no chance of surviving the hype at all, I don't think. This wasn't one of them. This was absolutely astounding. And the weird thing is, if I were to give you Rain and to give you this and then tell you it's the same artist on both, you wouldn't believe me, because the artistry and the creativity and imagination on show in this book compared to Rain is like night and day. It's really on another level. The book follows more or less like a 6-month period in Zoe Thorogood's life. She decides to start almost kind of documenting this comic as almost like a kind of journal. She wants to understand why she keeps having these mental breakdowns, why she keeps being kind of abused by her own self in her own mind over and over and over. And so it very much is a look at her, and she dissects herself on every level. She rips herself apart, and creatively it's astounding how many images she's got of herself. For example, she's got many different faces and forms in this book, because that's how she feels at different times, at different points in her life, at different moments. So there's not one Zoe Thorogood image in this book. There is loads of Zoe Thorogood images. There's this ever-present kind of, black dog-inspired kind of, depressive character following her around all the place, sometimes being bigger and stronger, sometimes not. It's looking at her relationships, looking at how she interacts and how she rips herself apart in her head and things like that. Suicidal thoughts. But honestly, it's so honest is what I love most about it. As a narrative, it hasn't really got a strict through line. You could read a lot of it out of order and it would still make sense, because it's thoughts and moments laid down to kind of give an impression of a person trying to make sense of their own life. There is obviously these kind of pivotal moments about her getting a relationship, her getting artist kind of contracts, her going to comic conventions and having experiences there, her being forced into these kind of more social environments and how she processes all that. And again, the different styles of art. You get kind of 8-bit art, manga inspired art. You get, cubism and basic kind of black and white art, more digital art. And yeah, it's just firing off so much imagination and creativity. Her brain must have been on fire writing this, and she just wanted to get it out, and she must have been exhausted by the end of this, really, genuinely, because you can see it was just all poured onto the page. And it's a wonderful read, because if you do suffer from any mental health issues, it's one of those things that helps you kind of put things a bit more into place and a bit more into perspective, and certainly makes you feel a little less lonely as well, I think, because you see other people having the same issues as you. And I loved it, and I will revisit Zoe Thorogood time and time again, but I certainly want her to do things on her own terms and not be drawing other people's work, because so far the stuff she's drawn and created on her own is mega light years ahead of everything else. But thank you very much for watching. I will do another one of these in the early weeks of April.